Friends, we gather together this afternoon to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Phyllis Levine. We do dearly wish that everyone who would like to have been here this afternoon could be here, but due to this experience, we have to do with what we have, although through the miracle of modern technology and through the presence of one another, we feel comforted together this afternoon. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are like a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return, you mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away, our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright, they shall have peace. The author of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms describes for us, in language that is both poignant and succinct, the nature of the good life and the fruits of that life. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat rasha'im uvderech hata'im lo amad uvmoshav leitzim lo yashav. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked or taken the path of sinners or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us join now together in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Phyllis Levine died early yesterday morning at the age of 92. She lived a long and a full life, and she enjoyed good health right up to the time that she fell this past August as she approached her 92nd birthday. Those who loved and who admired her will miss her. Phyllis was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and raised in Washington, D.C. She graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School and went on to get her bachelor's degree from George Washington University. After graduating, she worked a couple of years in the field of journalism. Phyllis and Alan Levine were married in 1952 and then moved to Cleveland, Alan's hometown. A new life in a new city for Phyllis. But it seems to have pertained to everything in her life. Phyllis adjusted well, found her place, and lived the rest of her days here. Tragedy struck her family in 1980 when Alan's and Phyllis's son Ricky died tragically. And as you, Ken, and you, Leslie, and Phyllis's grandchildren described the matter to me, at that moment of unspeakable loss, Phyllis and Alan knew that they had a decision to make. Whether, Ken, in your words, to bury themselves under a rock or to resolve to keep going, to keep living forward and optimistically, and always to be present for their other two children. And they chose the latter, courageously and blessedly so. When I asked Ken and Leslie to describe their mother and mother-in-law to me, here's what you said. Phyllis was always a steady presence, never flamboyant, never excessive, never, in your words, Ken, the fancy stuff, but always solid and always dependable. And you, Ken, went on to say something that you felt epitomized your mother, and I quote you. When I looked to find out what happened on the day my mother was born, I discovered that nothing really spectacular had occurred on that day. And that was my mother. Unspectacular, but reliable and deeply supportive of what we did and who we were. One of the great blessings of Phyllis's life was, Leslie, your family and the way in which they fully embraced her. For decades, your family lovingly welcomed Phyllis into their home to celebrate Shabbat and holidays and birthdays together. And how Phyllis loved being called Aunt Phyllis by Leslie's great nieces and nephews. All in all, a treasured blessing in her life. And I had a wonderful conversation last night with Phyllis's adoring and expressive grandchildren. When I asked them to describe their grandmother to me, a profusion of adjectives and anecdotes poured forth from them. Our grandmother was, you said, easygoing and relentless and always positive about life. And how she, as a prototypical grandmother, doted on you, making cheesecakes in anticipation of the arrival of her granddaughters, Lana and Suzanne, or how she would ask her grandchildren, what kind of treats do you want when you come over? Stephen, you remember playing with your grandmother's delicate items, the Russian nesting dolls, the kaleidoscope, the little gold twisty thing. Now, most people would be terrified when young children handled these things. Not Phyllis. She didn't care at all, because for her, the presence and pleasure of her grandchildren easily overrode the possibility of a nick or a dent, or worse, that might happen to these items. And Phyllis loved to share sweet treats with her grandchildren. Ice cream, M&Ms, desserts of all kinds. And were she to have dinner out with one of her grandchildren, as Ryan, you recall doing with her several times, a stop at Mitchell's for ice cream afterwards was always on the itinerary. Moreover, she loved those phone calls with all of you, then recalling and reveling in them days and weeks later. And the joy that Phyllis experienced in these phone calls regularly led to what you laughed about in our conversation last night. Your grandmother's difficulty in ending a phone call and hanging up, a habit of which seems to have become a habit for other members of the family. And Lana, you remember looking at the moon one night with your grandmother one night long ago, while your mother and father were at the hospital giving birth to Suzanne. It's the magical, mystical moon, Phyllis would tell you. That phrase soon became a beloved commonplace for the two of you. And this is just what you said over the phone to your grandmother the last time you spoke with her. And Phyllis enjoyed a full life of activity in and commitment to her Cleveland community. She belonged to the National Council of Jewish Women for almost 70 years, something that she was very proud of. She loved our temple, she was involved in its activities, and she served for a time as president of our Temple Women's Association. She also loved coming to services with members of her family, especially to be able to observe yahrzeits together. Phyllis also volunteered for a time at the gathering place. And though she was a steady and dependable presence to these organizations, Phyllis never looked for honors or for recognition. Now, many years after Ricky had died, Phyllis engaged in a labor of love, creating a beautiful Torah cover for one of our Torah scrolls in memory of Ricky. This is a cloak which I personally have caressed many times over the years as I have carried the Torah around the Heartsmark room and then removed it in preparation for the reading of the scroll. I did so in the past, and whenever I have the opportunity to do so in the future, I will be thinking about those two dear people, Alan and Phyllis Levine, now both of blessed memory, two people whom I admired and whom I loved. As Phyllis grew older, it became increasingly clear to her family that she would soon need to live in more protective quarters. Stubborn as she could sometimes be, she would have nothing of this, or of several of the other cautionary measures that her family promoted, like using a cane for balance. And eventually, gradually, Phyllis came to see the wisdom of using that cane, or of giving up her car, or of moving to Wiggins. But she acted on these things only when she felt that she had arrived at the belief on her own, that it really was her idea. For example, when at one point her family was trying to persuade her to use a walker, Phyllis characteristically balked. But then one day, finally in full embrace of the idea, she said to you, Leslie, "You know, Leslie, I am walking better." Phyllis is survived by her son, Ken, by her daughter-in-law, Leslie, and her son-in-law, Bernie, by her sister, Diane, and her brother-in-law, Bert, by her grandchildren, Ryan, and Ryan's fiancée, Erica, Stephen and Michelle, Lana and Suzanne, by her sister-in-law, Harriet, and by many nephews, cousins, and friends. She was predeceased by her husband, Alan, her daughter, Nancy, her son, Ricky, and her brother-in-law, Herb, and by her parents, Edward and Frida. Phyllis Levine lived a long and a full life. She was accommodating and upbeat, easy to get along with, and always ready to spread her joy and her love of life. But as we know, Phyllis also suffered the worst fate imaginable, the death of two children. Yet, as one of her grandchildren remarked last night, Phyllis went through the darkest of nights twice, and yet she remained committed to living life to the fullest, with optimism, with energy, and with grace. She taught us all how to live. Zichrona Livracha, the memory of Phyllis Levine, will always be our blessing. Amen. O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song that we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then it seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life and the answer to all of life's mysteries. Will you please rise now for the El Mole Rachamim? El Mole Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kadoshim Tahorim Kazohar Harakim Azhirim, Et Nishmat Fega Chaya Bat Freda, Shahacha La'olama, Bala Rachamim Yastireh B'Seder Kanafav La'olamim, Yitzror Bitzror HaChayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'Nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Phyllis Levine, our loved one who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and may her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us say together, Amen. The voice says, cry out, and I say, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when a wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever. Hatzur tamim pa'alo ki chalder rachav mishpat. El emunah ve'ein avel tzadik v'yasharhu. God is sure, our immovable rock. All God's work is upright. Who can say, what is it that you do? The Eternal governs what is above and what is below, overseeing both the valleys of death and the heights of life. God is sure, our immovable rock. Who can say to God, what will you do? You are righteous in your dealings in both death and life, and every soul is in your trust. We praise you, Judge of truth, who ordains death and summons us to life. Help us to feel your presence at this time, so that we may declare that God is upright, our rock, in whom there is no unrighteousness. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The dust returns to the earth as it was. The Spirit returns to God who gave it. It is only the house of the Spirit which we now lay within the earth. The Spirit itself cannot die. Receive in mercy, O God, the soul of our beloved departed Phyllis Levine. Grant her that everlasting peace which you have prepared for us in the world to come. Though no human eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor mind has grasped it, still it is our sure inheritance and our everlasting portion. O God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which loss inflicts is the measure of a love that is stronger than death. Though we cry in the anguish of our hearts, may we know that our Comforter is near, and may we cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In this spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us to your keeping, as we now repeat the words that have been hallowed by our generations, the Kaddish. as we say together, Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'Alma Divra Chirutei v'Yamlich Malchutei v'Chayechon of Yomechon of V'Chayedechol Beit Yisrael v'Agalav Izman Kari v'Yamru Amen Yahei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Almaya Yit Barach v'Yishtabach v'Yit Pa'ar v'Yit Romam v'Yit Naseh v'Yit Hadar v'Yit Halei v'Yit Halal Shmei Dekudusha Barichu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata v'Shirata Tushbechata v'Nechemata Da'amiran b'Alma v'Yamru Amen Yahei Shalom Rabbah Min Shemaya v'Chayim Aleinu v'Al Kol Yisrael v'Yamru Amen Oseh Shalom b'Mromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu v'Al Kol Yisrael v'Yamru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us, and let us say together, Amen. And to the family we now say, may God console you with all who mourn among all the families of the earth. Now go forth in peace to life, and may God go with you. We now ask the family to first shovel some dirt on the casket, and then those who would like to participate in this ritual may do so as well.